Hello, my name is Bruce Belzowski. I'm the Managing Director of the Automotive Futures Group here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I have with me, as part of our Automotive Insights series, Jim Sayer, who's the Director of the U of M Transportation Research Institute, otherwise known as UMTRI. Jim's been with UMTRI for about 28 years. He started out in a group called Human Factors, which was a joint appointment with the engineering group. And he's spent now starting his sixth year as director of UMTRI. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Bruce.
Now, UMTRI is a unique part of the University of Michigan. It started back in the 1960s and funding from the automotive industry as well in general. And it has multiple groups within UMTRI. They have one looks at an engineering group, engineering systems group that looks at connected and automated vehicles, driver assistance systems, traffic control and modeling, cybersecurity of vehicles and infrastructure, vehicle road intersections, road profiling. It really deals with a lot of issues with the engineering of vehicles, and as well as heavy vehicles, as well as passenger vehicles. They have a biosciences group, which pretty much looks at the effects of crashes on the human body. They have a Center for the Management of Information for Safe and Sustainable Transportation, and with the acronym CMIST, that does a lot of statistical analysis, secondary data analysis of crash data throughout from anywhere in the country, both federal and state level. They have a human factors group that Jim started out in, and this is the interaction of humans with the machines, and in this case, the automobile. And so you're looking at driver capabilities related to vision, perception, decision-making, psychomotor performance, and across all the demographics that you can imagine. And they'll do a lot of testing on this to try to create some guidelines for well-designed vehicle components and driving environments. And finally, the behavioral sciences group. This is more of the social science part of UMTRI. UMTRI is good at having a combination of engineering, science, and social science as part of their story. And behavioral sciences enhances the safe mobility for all ages, both the young and the very young and the very old, in terms of deepening the understanding of social and behavioral issues important to transportation. Jim, did you have anything you want to add on about the groups?
No, I mean, you're correct. We really kind of cover a wide range of different types of backgrounds. So we do have statisticians, we have engineers, we have social scientists, psychologists. So yeah, we try to cover the waterfront. Don't quite do that at this point, but we work very closely with one another. So we take a much broader view at problems rather than just an engineering or a social science perspective.
So when you look at UMTRI, it's really primarily a safety institute, and it's automotive and vehicle safety. Jim, what kind of projects are some of the main projects that are going on at UMTRI right now?
So we continue to do and have for decades work in crash biomechanics, which you referenced. What happens when a crash does occur in terms of the safety of the occupants. We have been doing work in driver assistance systems now for 30 years, starting out with adaptive cruise control. Now we're looking at level 2 and level 3 automated vehicle type systems. Mm-hmm. We're doing a lot of work in vehicle connectivity. So V to X, vehicle to the infrastructure, to pedestrians, infrastructure to vehicles. Still primarily with a safety focus, but also looking at improving traffic efficiency at the same time. Mm-hmm. In the crash statistics area, again, it's, looking at what are the outcomes associated with different types of crashes, what types of crashes are most prevalent under certain circumstances, but also looking at the types of benefits seen or the crashes prevented by different types of driver assistance systems. And then in the social and behavioral sciences, we're looking at, as you've mentioned, issues associated with older drivers as they begin to have to give up their driving, either for physiological reasons or just a sense of comfort in being able to drive themselves, and also teen drivers, so those that are just learning how to maneuver a car. And I guess lastly, human factors. So that's actually working in a number of areas. It's still safety in terms of how the person interacts with the center console, center stack, but also how they steer, how they interact with automated systems and driver assistance systems. Do they understand when it's their responsibility to control the vehicle versus the vehicle's responsibility? Things of that nature.
And Jim, you're continuing your research. This is kind of one of the pieces of being an UMTRI director. Is almost all the directors in the past had their own research, and they kind of continued their research. Probably had to dial it down a little bit considering the administrative duties that are part of being director. But what are you working on now?
Yeah, so I've been working on connected vehicle technology and connected vehicle technology deployment, both in the infrastructure and on the vehicle, as well as vulnerable road users, bikes and pedestrians, now for over a decade, continuing that work. Some of that work's getting expanded by other faculty to include new types of sensing technologies located at intersections, for example. But I'm continuing in that area. I'm doing work also in mobility equity. So working with, in this case, a health clinic in Ypsilanti, where their patients are having difficulty getting to their medical appointments. And so there's a large no-show rate. What kinds of mobility strategies might we be able to come up with would help those patients get to the clinic?
Now, in full disclosure, I spent 25 years at UMTRI as well, so I'm pretty familiar with what has happened at UMTRI in the past. I retired from there about 3 years ago, coming up on 4 years. And Jim, one of the things that was going on just before I left, and I could see that it was still going on after I left, was the story of for connected vehicles of DSRC versus 5G. Where are we on that now?
Yeah, so it's really DSRC versus CV to X, and they're both operating in the same part of the spectrum, 5.9 gigahertz. There is not a clear picture. This is kind of like the VHS versus Betamax battle. I would say that right now CV to X has a bit of an edge. The problem
CV stands for
connected vehicle
okay.
Connected vehicle to everything.
Okay.
V2X being X being everything.
Okay.
It's really, it has some benefits over DSRC and just on a technical level. But the biggest problem right now is we're not having a national rollout. And so we're losing traction compared to places like Japan and China and Europe.
Yeah.
We're also, because we're not having a rollout, the ability to save lives as a function of having this additional safety feature is we're missing out. Tens of thousands of crashes that could be prevented and thousands of serious injuries and close to 1,000 lives a year.
Will there be anything? Is there anything in the new infrastructure bill for this?
So there, without going into excruciating detail, there is money to help facilitate developing additional technologies and additional applications. There's still discussion about how those of us who have equipment in the infrastructure, how to upgrade that, how that might be achieved. There were several standing lawsuits against the Federal Communications Commission relative to the allocation of the spectrum.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
They
yeah.
want to take some of that spectrum away.
Right, right.
And which would make certain pieces of equipment, both onboard vehicles and already installed in the infrastructure, obsolete. So, if communities have paid for that, or in our instance, universities, who's going to reimburse them for the decision that they made?
Yeah. Yeah, we always knew that the challenge of connected vehicles was going to be part of the would be an infrastructure challenge of how quickly you can get infrastructure up and running throughout the US.
Well, I mean, very early on in kind of what I'll call the automated vehicle frenzy, 5 and 6 years ago, there were a lot of companies that were developing automated vehicles that said they don't need the infrastructure.
Right.
They'll operate
right.
Completely autonomously, which in and of itself is not true, because all of them rely to some degree, at least on GPS or positioning satellites. So by virtue of that alone, they're not truly autonomous.
Right.
But they felt that they could, with vehicle-based sensors, be able to detect and respond to all of the different types of driving scenarios. I personally didn't believe that. And I think, time has shown that, in fact, now the manufacturers really do need infrastructure, information from the infrastructure primarily, in order to be able to address a wide range of driving scenarios that they can't just do with onboard sensors alone, be they LiDAR, radar, image processing, for example.
Yeah. One of the things that they used to argue against the 5G story was latency. Is that still an issue?
No, I think I think it's not a latency issue. I think the issue we deal with is we keep chasing the latest communication medium. That is the problem. And because as soon as we would get 5G implemented, let's say we get CV to X implemented, then people are going to want to implement 5G. And after 5G, is it going to be 6G? I mean, people are already talking about 6G.
Yeah.
And working on developing it. So, at what point do you kind of like draw the line in the sand and say, this is what we're going to go with, and in order to roll it out and get buy-in from, the infrastructure owner operators as well as the vehicle manufacturers?
Yeah. Jim, I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk a little bit about UMTRI's connection to the university. And within the last, I think, 3 or 4 years, UMTRI, which used to be an independent institute within the university, joined with the U of M College of Engineering. Jim, could you talk a little bit about that transition?
Yeah, so, ever since its inception, there has been, some working relationship with the college. And there were a number of times in the past where there were conversations between UMTRI and the college about UMTRI potentially joining, but that just never didn't seem to be the right time or the right circumstances. But a few years ago, as you mentioned, we were at the time under the office of the Vice President for Research at the university, investment in the institute. Primarily, there were some capital things where we needed some improvements, but where we really needed investment was investment in our people, particularly new faculty. We had aging faculty, we had faculty that were retiring, and we were an all soft money institute. And so unless you bring the work in, you can't hire the people. So there was this chicken and egg. Do you hire people in hopes you're going to actually be able to find work for them? Or do you find work and then try to hire the people? Well, and then hiring faculty is not something you do overnight.
Mhm.
So there was always this, we really needed kind of some like baseline funding in order to get new faculty up and running, very similar to an academic department. And that is something that the college has very graciously provided us with. So we've recently hired 5 new faculty members, and we'll be hiring a 6th in the fall of 22.
Mhm.
So that's been really an enormous shot in the arm, on top of things like improving our communications network and just the general look and feel of the institute.
Mhm.
But again, things that we weren't able to get while we were under the Office of Research.
And one of the other things that is noted for at the University of Michigan is the MCity program, which is located right outside the UMTRI door, which I'm sure everybody thought or that thinks that MCity is connected to UMTRI, and it was, in terms of a lot of research that was being done inside UMTRI was related to MCity, but they were different groups within the university. And what's the relationship now between UMTRI and MCity?
So MCity did spin out of UMTRI.
Mhm.
It was deemed at the time when we were under the Office of Research that it should be a separate entity.
Mhm.
So for a while, we were both under the Office of Research until the university, or UMTRI, went to the College of Engineering.
Mhm.
There is a recent development in that effective January 1 of 22, MCity will also become part of the College of Engineering. So they're also leaving the Office of Research. But the relationship is such that, UMTRI conducts research. It has a number of faculty. We're at about 22 faculty right now.
Mhm.
Whereas MCity really is a conduit to industry and identifying, things that need to be done in terms of types of research questions that need to be answered. And so they facilitate working with the industry, and they provide funds for addressing pre-competitive types of research
Mhm.
that their members support. Independent of that is the test facility, the MCity test facility, which is what I actually recently got stuck in management because I conceived of and built that.
Mhm.
So that still operates as part of the MCity
Mhm.
organization. And it's actually still quite healthy in terms of its utilization, has a lot of customers that are actively using it.
Mhm. And then that kind of leads us into the future of automotive research and the industry. Of course, the industry is kind of an area that I've been focusing on for many years. And but when it comes down to the research on the new technologies, here we're looking at, from an MCity perspective, autonomous and connected vehicles. Uh, UMTRI does more than that. They're looking at a whole bunch of safety from a whole bunch of different angles, probably including autonomy and connected vehicles. When you look out into the next 5 to 10 years, where do you see the real focus in terms of research for automotive safety, Jim?
Well, I think like all industries, the time from concept to product is getting shorter and shorter
Mm-hmm.
uh, with every year that goes by. Automotive industry is no different. Clearly, uh, but then that puts pressure on researchers being able to address questions that tier 1 suppliers, tier 2 suppliers, and vehicle manufacturers, and the federal government, state government for that matter,
Mm-hmm.
have about what's going to be the safety impact or the traffic volume impact or emissions impact of different types of new technologies or new vehicle platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So it's become a very significantly condensed process.
Mm-hmm.
Things where we used to have 90 days to write a proposal on from the federal government, we will be lucky if we get 30. There are other contracting mechanisms where we'll be lucky if we get 14 days.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're seeing similar kinds of reductions in our ability to respond to industry as well. You know, they want answers quickly because it is a very fast moving, quickly developing market, and the technology, trying to keep up with the technology is darn near impossible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you think? What have you seen that has changed, Jim? That has supported this speed up of the process?
Yeah, so a lot more work in simulation
Mm-hmm.
and pre-established testing methodologies,
Mm-hmm.
things that when you get a new product, you've got a set series, you know, of paces to put something through,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
rather than develop new test procedures and equipment from
Mm-hmm.
scratch, which is something we used to do quite a bit of.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, you know, that's the biggest thing, that in simulation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of work's being done in simulation, but that in and of itself is requiring development of new simulation tools,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which are ever changing.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, but trying to keep up with that, you know, fast moving pace of the industry, you know, and the adoption of new technologies requiring that we have techniques
Mm-hmm.
in our toolbox to be able to evaluate things quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I studied the introduction of modeling and simulation in the auto industry, and oh God, it must have been the late 1990s. You know, and it really has developed significantly since then, in terms of the different programs that are available, and as you said, kind of a toolkit of this is the testing that we've done in the past. We're not making that many changes, or the changes that we make are small. We can simulate that stuff within the systems that we have. Obviously the test case for a lot of this speed up though was, I think, Tesla in terms of manufacturing, because they move so quickly to make things happen, and we see this happening in China as well. And I'm kind of a bit worried in the long run about whether the quality of the vehicles that are going to be coming out is going to be that much better or as good as in the past if you really speed up the process. It isn't that the manufacturers didn't want to speed up the process in the past. They wanted to do this, but they really felt that they needed to do a lot of testing just to make sure that the vehicle was safe and that it would not break down as quickly, and then they would not have as many warranty claims. How do you feel about that? The way this has played out, Jim?
You're right that there has been pressure external to the U.S., but also, you know, what I'll call non-traditional manufacturers in the United States, compared to companies like GM and Ford. But I think another big driver just simply is the rate of change of technology. And, you know, independent of another manufacturer, the idea that there are new things that you could put in your vehicle, problems or consumer demand, that's really kind of also pushing the envelope. It's not just the one or two manufacturers that are doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to keep up with technology.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it really, when you look at your expertise as a human factors researcher and also connecting with the engineering group, where do you see some of the future trends in terms of research in those areas for the auto industry?
Yeah, I think we're going to continue to see quite a bit of work in the connected area.
Mm-hmm.
We will be moving on from existing communication technologies to faster, more reliable ones over the years.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more work being done today in environment-based sensing, infrastructure-based sensing and communication than there was 10 years ago. Most of the vehicle manufacturers that are working in the AV space, regardless of the level, are looking towards the infrastructure to provide some form of information in order to address those kinds of scenarios that vehicle-based sensing alone can't address. We'll continue to see issues related to user interface as the demand on the driver changes and it shifts towards the vehicle. There are going to be a lot of questions about whose responsibility is it under a wide variety of situations. The driver is supposed to take control, or should the driver leave well enough alone and let the AV address the situation? I think it's also going to become a significant training issue. It's no longer the case that you can get trained as a teenager learning to drive, and things in terms of new technologies in the vehicle are very slow to evolve, and you can learn as you go. The vehicle's evolving rapidly, and so the question is, how do you train people that are long past receiving their driver's license, like myself? How do you keep them trained in accordance with the new developing technologies?
Yeah, good point. Good point. That is going to be the issue, and I know that your colleagues in human factors were some of the first ones to raising the red flags about the different levels of technology in terms of automation, and being able to tell drivers that you could take your hands off the wheel, and so you would not have to have your hands on the wheel, but you still have to stay alert. And they go, this is not going to work out. This is going to be a problem. People are going to get distracted. They're going to look at their phones. They're going to look away. And we all know from driving, a 1001, a 1002, a 1003 time frame doesn't give you enough time to respond, to get back into what's going on around you. It just seems like a recipe for disaster. How do you feel about that, Jim? How that is evolving or devolving, depending on how you look at it?
Yeah, I'd say it's evolving.
Yeah.
There still are a lot of challenges, not the least of which are naming conventions. And I won't go into specifics, but what one company calls a level 2 system versus another company calls it, or another company, and what are the features, the characteristics of that level 2 system. As we go into more of a world where shared vehicles are likely, how will someone who drives one platform learn what the characteristics are of the next platform they get in, even though they may both have level 2 scenarios? Do those systems address? A lot of work's going into driver state monitoring to see whether or not the driver is in fact in the loop for level 2 and level 3 systems. So that's still in developmental stages.
Yeah.
But all the major manufacturers have been working in that area. The level 2 systems that are deployed primarily do have driver state monitoring in them. There's still many improvements to be made, but it's going to be critical when we get to level 3. I mean, it's important with level 2, but it's going to become absolutely critical with level 3.
Yeah, that is definitely those things are definitely going to be challenges for drivers and for the engineers who are engineering the systems. Jim, one of the other areas that is changed, or I don't think is changing, it's actually growing within UMTRI, is the CCAT program, Center for Connected and Automated Transportation, headed by Henry Liu, who is going to become the new director for MCity, as well as running CCAT. Can you tell us a little bit about the CCAT program?
Yeah, CCAT is a US DOT funded transportation center. And we are a regional um, transportation center. So we have partners with Purdue, for example, Washington Community College, and several other academic institutions that we work with. And really the focus of the center is to be a financial conduit by providing opportunity funding to undertake research in the connected and automated technology realm. Now that means both on board the vehicle as well as in the infrastructure.
Mhm.
So they fund, they do a call for proposals, and then they fund well-written, what seem to be will be viable projects, research projects by different faculty at different institutions.
Mhm. And Henry's a little different because he's a transportation engineer. He's a civil engineer. He has that background. So he's also looking at the movement of vehicles as opposed to just the individual vehicle itself, right?
Correct. And he has a long history in traffic flow and traffic signal control research, how to optimize throughput. But increasingly now there's a direct interaction between that infrastructure and the vehicle, and what gains are to be had associated with that communication between the two.
And I know that one of the plans that, man, I don't know where we are in that because I wanted to ask you about that. This corridor that they were talking about building that would run from, say, Ann Arbor to Detroit and then go down the center of I-94 in between the two cities. That would be kind of a connected, automated transport hub along that corridor. Am I describing that correctly, Jim? And where are we in that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's the CAVNU project, and it's still in development phases. They're going about talking to communities, trying to also understand the kind of the state of certain technologies, and understanding kind of what are the needs of the various communities between Detroit and Ann Arbor, or even within certain neighborhoods within a given community. But it really is going to be focusing on most likely a dedicated lane in which AVs and partial AVs, so not full autonomous vehicles, but partially autonomous vehicles can operate, and kind of what you can do to help facilitate mobility throughout that entire corridor. So if a resident of Detroit needs to get to the University of Michigan Hospital for specialized treatment, for example, or someone who lives in Ann Arbor or Ypsilanti works and has to commute to Detroit, what can you do primarily with a dedicated lane approach with various types of levels of automation? Mass transit.
And I'm also assuming as a transport hub, being able to connect with along different points along there to meet whatever transporting goals you have, right?
Yeah, right. It's not enough just to have a dedicated lane that runs. I mean, we have things like that are called railroads.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's really the services that you provide alongside of the dedicated route to get people those first and last mile, but it's really further than that.
Yeah.
To that, so those hubs, those stops along the way. So micro transit, micro mobility. What roles did they play, particularly in communities that are underserved from a mobility perspective?
Yeah, and I think that the mobility as a service story fits well into that into that paradigm.
Yeah, and that can be part of it.
Yeah.
And someplace it may not make sense to have dedicated micro transit or micro mobility, or to build up, we'll call super hubs or super stations
Right.
in particular locations, because the population density or the number of people that are moving between that location and somewhere else along the route is just not high enough.
Hmm.
So things like on demand, which could take you to an adjoining neighborhood, to a hub, for example, are reasonable approaches. There's not a silver bullet.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And you have to examine the needs of different communities all along the way,
Right.
and in order to understand what their mobility needs are, and so what are the services that have to be provided.
And I think that's where the mobility as a service IT infrastructure really becomes a nice addition to the whole transport story, because you're able, through one app, being able to plan your whole route. And if those services are connected through the app, and timing is connected about how long you have to wait for a bus, or do you want to go with an Uber? Do you want to even rent a bicycle, or all whatever method that you want to take, and methods that are available along the route to you would all be there, and you could actually plan your route from beginning to end by using the different services. And as you said, they may be different for different places along that route. And it's a fascinating story to think about it, about the future of transportation in that respect. But tends to be more for places that are where there's a lot of people. Doesn't work so much. Doesn't sound like it works so well with rural areas. They have a whole different story. Suburban areas, it's kind of in between, right? We're a suburb of Detroit, right? So that whole suburban story gets played out in this paradigm. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. Jim, do you what's the time frame for that project?
Boy, as you're probably well aware, there was an effort to get a regional mobility initiative underway, a regional transportation authority, and to coordinate transportation across a 4-county area. That did not pass in 2 of the counties. And so I believe that's going to be going back up for another vote in perhaps as early as the fall of 22, but I'm not positive about that. It's increasingly becoming, it's increasingly being recognized that we have to work in a coordinated fashion. And that's not to say that transit agencies aren't working in some level of coordinated fashion, but in terms of the sharing of information for, say, a multimodal application available for you to go that last mile. And the same applies for all other different types of modes. How do you coordinate all that information so that the actual trip can be very seamless to the individual?
Yeah. So that's very, very different from some of the, that's very different from some of the safety stuff that UMTRI has been working on for the last 50 plus years, right?
Yeah, it starts to get out of the safety domain, not completely. I mean, there still remain safety questions. There are new types of safety questions as well, like personal safety.
Yeah.
If you're dropped off at a bus stop and you're waiting for mobility as a service, or you're transitioning from a personal vehicle to a bike, are you bringing a helmet along?
Right.
So there are different types of safety concerns that come with that multimodal approach.
Yeah. Very good. Jim, I think that's all the questions we have for today. Again, thanks a lot for taking the time. And I think our audience is really going to enjoy and some of this information and insights that you've given them about what's going on at UMTRI in terms of research and some of the future trends for research in the automotive industry, especially from the safety and transportation area. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.